for our first Zoom meeting and a couple of pieces of information. We're going to hold the start of this for a few more minutes to let everybody join, and then we will go as quickly as we feel everybody's with us. Welcome.
Hey, I don't see Steve Fleming.
You got a better offer.
He's there. Apparently he's muted. He can't talk. We're not picking up his voice.
He just said, yes, I can't
He's
speak.
thumbed up. Steve, your mute button might be on the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. No?
Try the computer or your iPhone, the volume on your computer. Turn that up. That might be it.
So as usual, technology, we're trying to do this for the first time. We appreciate your patience with our effort. And again, we welcome you. We'll get started in just a few minutes here. Steve, you may have to dial in to it if you can't get your computer audio to work.
We can just speak for Steve. Business is great. People are wonderful.
Money's cheap.
No complaints. PPP program was just kick-ass.
They're paying 5% on CDs.
I think he's left the room.
No potty mouth, people. Come on. Just a couple minutes. So let's go ahead and get started. My name is John Leonard. I'm the current president of Lambda Alpha Sacramento. I'm very pleased to be in this role and excited about our first effort on a Zoom meeting to touch base on not only with the membership. I think we all miss being together and the social aspects of our meetings, but unfortunately at this time we're unable to do that. We have about 89 registered attendees today, which is absolutely fabulous. We didn't expect such a great turnout, but thank you all for joining. It might just be a function of the fact that you have nothing better to do, but regardless, we're pleased that you're with us. A couple of housekeeping items. We're going to have another Zoom event on May 26th. Our featured speaker is Steve Gordon, who is the director of the Department of Motor Vehicles for the state of California. And he will be, I'm sure, making a great presentation to us about subject matter associated with DMV. We are seeking sponsorships for that. If you're interested in having exposure on the Zoom meeting to all of our participants, and if we have a turnout, something similar to this, we'll be in great shape. The sponsorships, I believe, are going to be $150 each. If you'd like to participate in that, you'll have an opportunity to make your 1-minute spiel at the beginning of the event. And Suzanne Blackledge will send out information on that invitation and potential sponsorships when she sends out her invitation. That being said, I have one more housekeeping item at the bottom of your screen. Those of you who are very familiar with Zoom are probably already aware of this. At the bottom of your screen in the center, there is a chat button, and you can use that as a tool to send questions that you may have into Suzanne, our moderator, and to Randy.
Ask questions. I just keep this phone on and feed you into my.
And then, Randy, you're not muted.
Yeah.
And then, with that, I will introduce Randy, who seems to be excited about joining the conversation right away. So, Randy Getz is our host today, and he's going to introduce the panel. And with that, I thank you for joining us.
We were actually just improvising. Steve doesn't have any audio, so I called him on my mobile, and he is going to talk through my mobile into my computer speaker and thus be able to tell us what's going on in the banking world. So just say something so we see if this works, okay?
Yeah, I heard you guys speaking, but unfortunately, or maybe fortunately for you guys, you couldn't hear me.
Hio, can you hear him?
We can hear him.
Okay. Okay. So, comme ci, comme ça. Okay. Thanks for joining us. Let me introduce the panel. Randy Dixon is the managing director of Colliers, where he runs one of the most successful commercial real estate brokerages in Northern California, and has made it his career picking off capable folks from our firm, Jones Lang LaSalle, and others to populate his team's ranks to our detriment. Prior to the position at Colliers, he ran Hines Northern California operations. Hines is one of the largest investor developers in the world. Steve Fleming is our technically handicapped president and CEO of River City Bank, which is one of the largest and most profitable privately held banks in the United States. And one of the things I'm looking forward to asking him is truly how the Paycheck Protection Program went, because that was a remarkable experience, I'm sure, for all of the lenders and participants involved. Nancy Park is a partner with Best in Krieger. She is the managing partner, and she is also a phenomenal rower and a stalwart member of River City Rowing Club, and got me involved in rowing at the beginning of this year. I was actually erging in my garage earlier this morning. Thank you, Nancy. Pete Thompson rounds out our panel. Pete is president of Rubicon Partners, which is an investment and development firm. Prior to that, he was with Speaker Properties with his partner, Kip Blewett. And Kip has been responsible for the acquisition and rehabilitation of some of the most iconic buildings in Sacramento, including the Forum Building on 9th Street, the Citizen Hotel, which previously was the 926J building. And most recently, he has resurrected and resuscitated 555 Capitol Mall and turned that into one of the most profitable and fully occupied office buildings in Sacramento. So to begin, I'd like to start with Randy, if I may, and just generically, I know that my wife and I were in Mexico up until later the 13th, and went from this of March 13th, and went from this glorious cultural and culinary bubble and descended into Dante's first circle of hell when we landed at SMF. I'm just curious, how's business? I mean, what's the evolution been like for you guys over the last couple of months now that you have some sense of perspective?
Yeah, it's a broad question. As a company, Colliers, you know, all the deals that were in motion for the most part slowed down. Some needed to escalate. As far as sales go, pretty much everybody sat on the sidelines. Just nobody wants to make a decision. So our revenues are down. We were only down about 15% in April. We're down about, depending on what office you're in Northern California, 25 to 50%. And in May, in April, March, it was in April, and in May, we're expecting 25 to 75% down in revenue. So significant impact to our business. Most houses have let people go or put people on furlough. But for the most part, it's been driven by our clients and our businesses. So I can get into that if that's part of the question, or I can.
Yeah, I was just curious. I mean, I know that when I look at our guys and gals, retail is probably the most affected. That's the most, what shall I say, customer-facing business line.
Retail, hospitality, and transportation all been severely impacted, obviously. Most of commercial real estate is heavily impacted by employment and consumer spending, and you all know where that's been at. We've had significant job losses. Our unemployment's going up. Businesses are not able to function like they traditionally would. Retail has been the most significant impacted. We're seeing, some estimation 25 to 30% of all retailers will not be in business when we come out of this. You have 30 national retailers either in bankruptcy or anticipating to file for bankruptcy support. You've got you know, if without consumer spending, that's not coming back, and without jobs, they're not spending. So it's sort of a vicious cycle. Office is a little early to tell yet. It certainly has slowed. All activity has slowed. It's almost to a standstill. But office has been impacted by what's going to happen when we come out of that. We know that the high density offices are going to have a harder time of it. And employers are looking at bringing people in shifts and waves and accommodate the social spacing that's required. And we're expecting this to be literally 12 to 18 months until we get a vaccine, or there's 70% of the population that's exposed to this. It's going to be continue to protect those. Hopefully it's going to focus on the high risk, and the low risk we can get back to work. But industrial is probably the strongest sector, still most active sector.
Right.
With e-commerce on the rise as a result of this, we're seeing significant demand. Development has not stopped. Developers continue to move forward in our market. You might see some pure spec ones slow down and kind of let's see what happens. But for the most part, everybody's full steam ahead. Multifamily is also challenged. Obviously, the demand for housing doesn't go away, but with the support from our government and local jurisdictions for rent relief, you're seeing a lot of people not paying. That's going to continue to escalate. And that means that a lot of the mom and pop owners that are maybe more heavily leveraged are going to be challenged. I think everybody assumes it's a pretty big reset on multifamily and values. And that'll be told when we get out of this. The demand, we don't think the demand is going to diminish at all. It's going to continue. In fact, we think the demand will continue to grow, but the rates may be impacted by what's happening with the economy and what we're seeing with income and joblessness. So we're getting calls to take on projects. There's a lot of money. There's a lot of interest out there to find a deal in this current economy. But most people who are sellers are sitting on the sidelines and going to wait and see what would come out of this.
Do you see, if we were, and I'm not trying to force the issue, but if we were looking for a bright spot, would it be fair to say that other lines of business are probably going to be ascendant, like property management, valuation and appraisal, debt and structured finance as we move forward? Would that be a fair statement?
Very, very fair. Yeah, I think all those sectors are going to see an increase in demand. And but you know, that's all comes down to cost and pricing. And if your revenues are down, you're cutting those costs. So you know, it's going to be a fine balance as we move forward here and come out of this.
Steve,
There's
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Randy, I don't want to disrupt your questions if you were going to Steve next. There's a lot of, sort of side issues that are going to come up out of this. Actually, one of them is if 25 to 30% of the businesses aren't coming back, and other things like sporting events aren't coming back with fans, things like that. All of the multiplier effect of all of those businesses. John Leonard and I were just chatting about this morning. They talk about a multiplier effect of like 10 times for having a game and all of the business that rolls off of, say, Golden One. And not only is Golden One not operating, but all of the businesses and their impact of not being able to even run a game, and the refunds and the impact of their operation is hugely affected.
Well, in real estate, the supply chain for all those, right? You think of the food.
All of the municipal effects. Yeah,
Right.
The food, just all of the little guys that, the people selling flags and balloons and t-shirts and pizza and everything that rolls up, the parking operators, the Uber drivers, the restaurants down the street, the parking revenue in garages and in meters. And the municipalities are going to be really short on not just parking revenue, but things like transit, the transit tax for hotels. Cities are going to lose huge amounts of revenue from travelers not staying in hotels, and the tax revenue that's generated for that pays for so many programs and goes into the general fund just for general operations. There are going to be some huge ripple effects based on this gap in income. I know in Sacramento, Daryl Steinberg's got his current budget, based on what's missing right now, but the longer this goes on, the more it's going to affect the ongoing operations of municipalities. And again, just rolling down the pike, schools are affected, and being able to operate schools and all of the people employed by schools that are maybe or maybe not getting the ripple effect of purchases and food service and things like that normally would be happening at this time, but are closed. Childcare.
I need to excuse myself and go put a gun in my mouth. I'll be back in a few minutes.
It's not good news, for sure.
Well, no. Okay. So what are you hearing from your clients?
So that's the interesting part. We have a pretty large municipal client base, and that business has not slowed down. In fact, is more demanding than ever. Elk Grove Unified School District is one of our largest clients, and they are on the phone with our people 20 hours a day because of the impact of all of this. I think the biggest winners coming out of this are litigators once courts open again, because there are going to be so many lawsuits that are going to come out of this for a variety of reasons. So it'll be a different winner, I guess. People with disabilities who haven't been served, or people who feel like they took the bigger end of the loss and they shouldn't have. And I think that's one of the biggest problems with this is, somebody pointing the finger and saying, hey, landlords, you should take the hit on this and just forgive all my rent, from tenants, when really there has to be an allocation of risk among parties that this is a no fault, issue. Everybody's going to feel the pain. It's got to be shared. And, you can't just push it all on one side of the table and say, you take it. It's going to be all the way around, and everybody's going to have to absorb some loss.
There was a marvelous article in the New York Times recently by an economist who said that this will touch us all, and I think that's correct. I think each of us is going to be affected on some level. Are you able to distinguish? Are you having clients who are coming to you, say, on the tenant side, that are seeking concessions from landlords, and are you able to distinguish between concessions that are opportunistic from those that are truly economically driven?
Yeah.
Was there more to that, or was that?
She's frozen. I think she got
During this time, which is a little unreasonable and a little uninformed. And also I received a number of calls from landlords who are saying, this guy was a flake before it started, and now he's even more of a flake. This is ridiculous. How can I get this guy out? And sorry, you're not. Nothing's going to happen until the courts open up again. And if you're in LA or San Francisco, you're really screwed, because LA just passed a code ordinance a week ago that basically for 12 months, you're going to be prohibited from evicting people that are COVID related, or any sort of justification for that, on the residential side, and 3 months for commercial. So some of the municipalities are really going out there to protect the tenants. So I've had both sides of things. I have both letters for people, requesting rents, but in a rational way. Not, for people who were just flaky before. They were people in good standing. And I have written amendments for deals, trying to rationalize things. And then I've also counseled landlords to be realistic about what is the way for tenant, what is reasonable to expect a tenant to pay back when things get back to normal. You can't expect them to pay a 50% increase in rent and split, a month's rent forgiveness over 2 months. That's a huge expense, and they're going to be just recovering. So you have to be really cognizant of how that payback happens if you're restructuring the rent.
Without trying to sound too philosophical, are you getting the impression from the folks with whom you're speaking that there really is sort of a we're all in this together kind of a thing, and that it's maybe a little less adversarial than it might be, that there's a recognition that this time it's different, and it shouldn't be as tribal, it can be more collaborative? Or are you seeing that people are there's just as much of a schism as there might have been where there's any kind of controversy?
I'd say 80-20. I'd say 80% are rational. And if you, point out some of the, like, hey, you should be considering this side of it, if you weren't. And then I've gotten, 20% of just crazy people. Like, there's just no talking any sense into them. It's not one side or the other. It's just like, they just don't get it. And they weren't going to get it before either.
Yeah. Interesting. Steve, how was the Paycheck Protection Program? What was that like? Seriously. Hang on. Are you still there?
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we're good.
Yeah. So sorry about that. So yeah, it was really crazy. Unlike anything I've ever experienced in my 40-year banking career. Congress passed the CARES Act on March 27th and said the SBA portal will be open in a week, and we're going to fund it with $349 billion, which probably isn't going to be enough to cover all of the eligible borrowers. And by the way, most of this money is going to be forgivable, so it's effectively going to be a grant. So you put that all together, you're going to have a lot of really anxious people, coupled with some financial distress that they're under. So you're offering free money, but there's not enough of it to go around. You've got to get your application in first. You've got to get it processed quickly. So all of that really raised the stress level, understandably, for borrowers. And of course, that got passed on to the banks, the folks at the banks who were working on these loans. And I know at our bank, and I'm pretty sure at most of the other banks, I know we have other bankers on the call, pretty sure at most banks, people were working extremely long hours, and literally working 17-hour days. We had folks working 17-hour days, 7 days a week for a month. I mean, it was really a pretty intense period for that first round of $349 billion. Then there was a pause, and Congress passed the next round of $310 billion, and that's done very differently. There's still some of that money available. I think about 40% is still available. So any business that is eligible looks like is going to receive the money if they apply. So it's been far less stressful as we've gotten into round two.
With respect to the loans that you make, many of which are commercial real estate loans, what sort of feedback are you getting from your borrowers these days? Is there anxiety, or are they comfortable that they're going to be able to service debt? What are they telling you?
So are you talking about existing loans on the books or new loans in the pipeline?
First, I want to ask about existing loans on the books, folks with whom you have a relationship. What level of stress and anxiety are they experiencing, and how are you working with them? And then I have a question as to, with respect to new loans, are you effectively not encouraging certain loans, read unanchored retail, or are you focusing on certain loans, fully occupied industrial? Where I'd like to know sort of what's been going on with the inventory that you have on the books, and then how are you seeing things playing out over the next 6 months?
Yeah. Okay. Good questions. Let's start with the first one, the existing loans. And I would say the reaction from the borrowers is very fact specific, depending upon the asset class. As Randy mentioned, and I think everybody knows, different asset classes are being impacted differently. So it's one thing if you've got a retail property versus, let's say, you've got an industrial property with Amazon as your tenant. So it depends a lot on the individual facts of the particular property, and it also depends on the leverage in the property. Those with higher leverage, it's more problematic for them as the cash flow gets impaired. And I should point out that our window in is a little bit skewed because of the nature of our underwriting. Our bank has tended to be on the conservative end of commercial real estate lending. So we tend to have a lot of borrowers that are have lower leverage. That doesn't mean they're not being impacted. I think a lot of them, I know a lot of them are being impacted either with our properties or other properties that they have in their portfolios. But the conversations about what to do with our loans are really driven by the specifics around the individual borrowers. I can tell you this, and let me preface this by first knocking on wood, and second saying I think we're really early in this, and that what I'm going to give you right now is the best it is going to be, because I think it's going to deteriorate from here. But we have about 400 loans on our books, and we've done modifications to under 10 out of those 400, and most of those 10 or under 10 have been a conversion from a complete amortizing principal and interest payment to the borrower just paying interest for say 3 months. We've had very few where the borrowers just said, I can't pay you anything, and I need you to firm it. Literally, you can count those on one hand. I expect that to get worse. I'm not expecting that to stay the way it is.
Are there property types, and there's probably a theme here, but are there property types about which you are more concerned than not?
Oh, for sure. Retail sucks. I live in Davis. I went down to get my Indian takeaway on Saturday and did a little walk around the commercial district, and I was just struck by what I think are just a ton of zombie businesses there. They may be, they may not have closed up for good yet, but they're not going to have revenue streams anywhere near where they need to be able to support the rents on their properties. And I thought, well, the landlords they're not going to evict them now, one, because they can't, and two, because they don't have anybody to backfill. So, it's really in everybody's interest that the landlord work with those tenants. But I really think it's going to be a long time before, particularly a place like Davis, where you have a lot of restaurant tenants. The economics of that business just don't work. Paying high rents and only having tables of 60% of capacity of what you had before. Obviously, something has to give, and that's probably going to be the rent that they can pay. And I don't see that changing here in 2-3 months. In fact, they get worse in 2-3 months because the government and the Fed have just dropped a lot of money, a lot of cash into our system, and that at some point they're going to be unable to do that, and I think that's when things get worse. So retail for sure, really worried about that. Office would be next in line. I think it's pretty clear that a lot of businesses are seeing that having people work remotely actually is okay, and there's a lot more productivity than a lot of business executives thought they might have. So I think the demand for office space will decline. On the other hand, I think office design is going to change somewhat, and you're going to need more space. You're going to have to spread out more, so that might suggest bigger footprints. But I think the net of that is probably going to be less space, particularly in the near term. By near term, I mean the next couple of years, as we wait for a vaccine or herd immunity, and also a lot of these businesses just aren't going to have the revenue stream to be able to make their rent payments. So I think office is going to get hit pretty hard, and multifamily and industrial, I think, are in far better shape.
What are you hearing from your peers?
Yeah, so they're pretty much in the same boat. They were sucking water out of a fire hose during the PPP rollout. We didn't get a lot of warning. This was just a central program with the banks being tasked with a role to hand out the money, which we were happy to do, but it was a big lift. And so I think every bank, I should say every bank, some banks opted not to participate. And obviously, there's a few large banks that struggled with it. But the vast majority of the banks were in the same boat, which was just working really hard to try and serve their clients and even some of their non-clients, clients of other banks. I was obviously proud of our bank, but I was proud of our industry. I thought the banking industry really stepped up during that difficult period.
Thank you. Peter? Hi, Peter. What's going through your mind right now? You've been through a number of cycles. You're an exceedingly experienced developer in a very high quality buildings, and I'm not just saying that. And you're an enormously astute investor. What are you thinking when you just sit back and look at what's going on in the world these days?
Well, first of all, the comments from everybody else so far, they've hit on a lot of the talking points that I would hit on. But I guess I'm generally an optimist. So I always look at this and say, where can you find a bright spot? And I guess the bright spot for me, Randy, is we go through cycles, and we typically do better in rough cycles than we do at the top. And I certainly feel like, we're heading towards a bit of a downturn that's pretty obvious. There's so many unknowns that none of us know quite how deep it's going to be. Google and Facebook has sent everyone home until 2021, which was certainly interesting. They're taking a different approach. And then he talked about density going from down to roughly one person per 120 feet, now going up to above one person per 300 feet. So clearly, office is being redesigned. And then at the same time, I have conversations like I had with you the other day, Randy, where you go, this working from home works great for me. And I have to admit, I've been one who didn't think it was going to move that far, that fast. And then Mike Diepenbrock reminded me that the millennials don't think like I do. I'm sort of on the other end of the curve. And I think that so many businesses are getting a forced lesson right now on the efficiencies that you can get by having people work from home. It won't work for every industry. We all know that. But I do think office is just going to be largely redesigned in terms of, is there shift work? What is the density within the space? What are the paths of travel that you have throughout it? How much can you do without touching something? I think that is all coming, and it's coming much quicker than any of us ever expected. So I look at that, and then I look at Sacramento and I go, well, the good news is historically we've always trailed the market or trailed the Bay Area by at least a year or two in terms of impacts. Now, we've never seen anything hit as fast as this hit, so I'm frankly not quite sure how to process that. But we are fortunate. We have, very little spec construction going on in this market, which I think really puts us in great shape, because depending which brokerage house numbers you use, we have vacancy rates somewhere in the single digits for office. So I think we're pretty safe. We're still actually making some deals, thanks to Randy's team, at economics similar to what we were before. But of course, those are generally existing tenants that we're working with. And we know that that's going to back off a little bit. But, overall, I think given that office leases, turn every 5 years, it's going to take a little while to hit. But I do expect that these markets are going to back up a little bit in the coming years. And again, how long will it take for office to get back? I don't know, but I'm sort of where Randy was. I think I don't think we're going to have a dramatic decline in Sacramento. I think in the Bay Area, you're going to see it really fast. So then I start to look at the positive side, which is the good news is we've got good properties, and they are doing well. They're well leased, and most of them have long terms that are going to reach over this particular cycle. So then I start to become opportunistic and say, well, where's the market going to go? And are we in a position to buy some new assets? Now, one of the other things that Kip and I have concluded in recent years is, frankly, with all these millennials coming up, we've really focused on A properties. We want properties that are very well located. We have never played into high density buildings. We generally are designing buildings with narrower bay depths that cater to sort of the Class A tenants that want just a higher profile. We think the location is more important than ever. And then the other primary cycle that we think we're going to see is this movement from the urban to the suburban. And it was interesting, in recent years, there was this big push into the urban environment. But talking to, again, the gentleman yesterday in the Bay Area who was talking about in San Francisco, if you're a high-tech company in a high-rise, and all of a sudden you can only put one person in each elevator, you can imagine all of the logistic things that you run into, not to mention just the quality of life that a lot of people are experiencing by being able to work from home. And I think technology has clearly progressed to the point that it's just a new world. And we're going to be watching that with great interest.
If I gave you today 10 million bucks, 15 million bucks, and I asked you to prudently and profitably deploy it, what would you be looking at? Anything, or would you just say, hey, I'd rather not have that conversation. Let's give me the money in 6 months and let's just sort of see where we are.
Well, first, the first response is, frankly, right now, I think there's, the clouds are everywhere. So it's really hard to underwrite anything. Now, having said that, we're typically value add players. So we're always looking for where is the most pain in the cycle that we can take advantage of. So ironically, right now, hotels have been hit tremendously hard. There are opportunities, I think, or there will be opportunities in the near term to buy hotels. Office buildings, at least in Sacramento, and we stay generally local.
Yeah.
I think it's going to take a while. So I don't see a lot of those opportunities immediately here. And then the other one, which is industrial. Many of you don't know, but we have a history of some industrial, and we're working on a lot of entitlements up in Woodland that we've been working on for some years to build upwards of 2 million square feet of industrial. I love the industrial markets. I don't care where we are in the economic cycle. I think from an industrial perspective, logistics are in the second inning or third inning. So that is a place that we are frankly looking more than we have in the past.
Hey,
Randy.
Pete, this is Nancy. I was going to ask you about construction. Can you talk about construction at all and what you're seeing with construction people about how that might affect your deals that are going forward? I'm sorry to interrupt, Randy.
No, go ahead.
Well, for us, these days up here, everything we've been buying, we're renovating. So our construction crews are still working in the projects. If we have new tenants to build out, which right now, frankly, activity has stalled, but I don't see an issue on retrofitting buildings today because the construction industry is allowed to do so. Now, building new product is a much more interesting question that, frankly, I don't know where that is. I can tell you that a year ago, if you talked to any of us about construction costs, I mean, there was an absolute shortage on construction workers. Prices continue to escalate, at numbers that we can't make sense of generally in Sacramento on the office side. I think it'll be really interesting to see where we are in 6 months, because I think a lot of the new development that was in the pipeline is obviously going to be pulled. And so hopefully we will see some easing on the construction side.
Right. There's a big project that I've been working on outside of this area that was going to be placed on hold to try and wait to see if we could get better construction pricing. But now the thought is, hey, we think we're going to be able to get better construction pricing now because of the dearth of projects. So it's a real opportunistic time to move forward with a project that's well underwritten and not spec.
Yeah. And I think that's very true. So that's an opportunity in the future. But again, I think a lot of new development, regardless of category, is just going to the sidelines right now because of all the uncertainty. Again, where are rents going to be and when are they going to be there? It's really hard to know.
Peter, how do you think Sacramento stacks up against other markets outside of forget the Bay Area for a while, just in terms of how severe the downturn is going to be here? I mean, my sense is that in terms of services, we're going to be disproportionately affected because we probably have double the amount of retail space that we need given our population. But I'm just curious, and I think from a logistics standpoint, industrial is going to remain strong.
Yeah.
And from a locational standpoint, we're at the intersection of 5 and 80, and you can cover all the western states in one day from a distribution standpoint. So we're in a good place in that regard, to wit, your deal in Woodland. But are we going to suffer disproportionately in Sacramento, or are we simply going to be hurting like everybody else?
First of all, I don't think that we're going to suffer as much as many other communities. It was funny, I was looking yesterday at the Cushman numbers sort of nationally for how much space is being built in each submarket. And gosh, you go to Nashville, some of these other major suburban markets where you're seeing 5 to 10% of the office supply is under construction right now. So they're just tremendous number of buildings coming in. Austin, I think, is one of the highest. So I frankly think that they are in a tougher place than we are. The lack of construction here just, again, puts us in a great place. And I still think that at least where we play, most of our tenants are under 5,000 feet. We play for the professional office sector in that, 3,000 to 4,000 foot average tenant size. And those aren't necessarily national firms. And so we look at them as being more stable. And I just don't think that we're going to see near the pain that you are in the other markets. Now, it was funny, back in my speaker days when we were a public company, the issue with Sacramento was always, you guys, the bait is not big enough. We'd rather put money in the Bay Area when it's low, go really high, and then get out as fast as we can. Whereas Sacramento just floats along. We obviously will have variance up and down, but I don't think it's nearly as great as other markets.
Interesting. We have 17 minutes left before our 1 o'clock cutoff. And so unless my fellow panelists have something that they would like to bring up that we haven't talked about so far, I was going to open it up to questions and see if people would like to talk about anything.
Hey, Randy, how are people feeling about their PPP money? Did most people get it?
Steve, are you able to address that?
Yeah, I am. So the first round, as I mentioned, was $349 billion, and that went like hotcakes. There was a fight to get your Willy Wonka's golden ticket. The second round, $310 billion. And the last I had heard, and there's not a great scoreboard for publishing this, but the last I heard, there was still about 30 to 40% of that money still left, and it appears that it's moving at a trickle pace at this point. So I would think most businesses that are eligible and apply will get their money. Having said all of that, I literally got a call this morning from a small customer of a large bank, and they said they're in the queue there, and they're not sure what that means, and could we help them? We said, sure, we take care of them. So that suggests that, there are some people at some of the large banks, at least, that have yet to get processed. But, the general sentiment is it feels a lot different now than it did right after the launch of the first round, where you're just not hearing the complaints from particularly the smallest of the small businesses.
The issue that I'm hearing a lot, and being a CPA, is the government threatening to issue penalties and or criminal charges for taking the money when you don't need it. Well, the question is, what's need? And so they gave it to till the 14th to give the money back without any kind of penalty or issue. And we're just seeing it a lot of the clients are very uneasy about that. They've run their businesses fairly well. They have some money to get by, but we don't know what's going to happen in the future. So there's a lot of uneasiness about that right now. I just wondered what everybody else is feeling about that.
Yeah, no doubt there's some anxiety around that topic. With the first round, with the applications, all the borrowers had to sign various certifications. And the basic certification was that due to the current economic uncertainty, they needed the money. Then later in April, the SBA came out with their frequently asked questions, and they raised the bar on the certification. And they were more specific around businesses needed to certify that they didn't have other liquidity sources that would see them through the downturn, and they gave a window for those borrowers that had received the money. They gave them a window to return the money based on this higher bar, and with that they also sent out messages that they were going to be, number one, auditing most of the borrowers who set $2 million or more. Remember, the program allowed for up to $10 million. So they're saying, we're going to audit you if you're one of the larger borrowers. And so they raised the risk of the government coming after you. And that's caused some anxiety, and it's caused some uncertainty and just difficulty in trying to interpret the certifications and how your business's particular fact set marries up with the certifications that you have to make. And there isn't, honestly, there's not a lot of examples given and guidance. So everybody's got to make their own decision based on some somewhat vague guidance being given by the SBA.
A couple of things. Two of the attendees weighed in on via chat to me. One suggested that what we may see as a result of a decline in revenue streams and an overall sort of holistic reduction in rental values is an uptick in Proposition 8 property tax appeals. And I agree with that. My team and I have done a lot of ad valorem work over the years, and one of the concerns that we have at this point is that the evidence that you can adduce for purposes of supporting an application for assessment reduction only goes until the end of March, and the downturn really hadn't come through as big as it has until subsequently. And so I'm not sure that there will be a significant uptick in Prop 8 or successful Prop 8 appeals this year, but I think there most certainly will next year. Another of our attendees noted that in a national webinar that was put on by one of the international real estate companies, they predicted that because of a loss of productivity among workers, that there would be actually more office space consumed on a prospective basis, as opposed to less as people are brought back into the office, which is an interesting perspective. Fritz Brown sent me a text, and he was wondering, and maybe somebody else that's attending can address this, what's going on in the residential market? Are we seeing as profound an effect on residential in sales, new construction and all that as we are for commercial? Is there somebody that can talk about that for a sec?
Yeah, again, I think speaking from the real estate brokerage side, multifamily is going to continue to be healthy in our market. We're still high occupancy. We still lead the nation in rent growth. We did lead the nation in rent growth, and we have our occupancies too in the country. So, and we're also seeing a lower percentage of non-payers of rent in this time currently compared to our other markets. So I think the demand and the people that we're seeing who are wanting to want to get out of California, need liquid, they need their cash, or are just so nervous about what the government might do in regards to the benefit to the tenant that they're going to distress their real estate. So they're making a conscious decision to pick up and move and get out while they can. Others are ready to buy, ready to take advantage of the local market. We continue to see, and we're continue to optimistic to see various people moving to our market simply for housing costs alone. And we continue to see more projects applied for development in our downtown market, the CBD, the live, work, play environment. We don't see that changing. And I'll respond to a couple other things too. I think, like Pete, we're optimists at heart and really believe that the economy was very robust and moving in a very healthy way. And this is sort of an artificial distress and depression. And I think that we'll get through this. And it may take, sometimes they say the recovery's 3 years out. And the last cycle was 3 years of of battle wounds and then 6 years of recovery. Everybody believes this will happen sooner and quicker, and we believe that too. We think the fundamentals of our market, being a heavy government market in a state that's pro-government, we're going to continue to see demand and growth. If you look at our construction and cranes in the sky, those are our developers right now. We continue to see, you get the NBA, you got the MLS, those aren't going to go defunct. It all may get reset and depressed, and maybe for a short period of time, but we're pretty optimistic that we're going to come out of this, and we'll come out really picking up where we left, as opposed to starting over where we had to in the previous cycle. So we're positive. Construction costs, to answer Nancy's question and talking to contractors that we work with, costs are down 15 to 30%. Employment's easier to find, not as easy as everything, but employment, they've let off, everybody let off a certain percent of employees. Many have hired some of those back, and there's still employees out there to hire. And obviously there's more people and unemployment. So I think that there's an opportunity there. I think the big challenge is retail. Again, you look at Arden Fair, and Nordstrom's announced they're closing, and Sears and JCPenney's and the challenges, but Mark's going to figure it out. I think he'll take advantage of the idea of reuse and look at a different sort of product. It's the malls as we've known them. The big regional malls are going to fade. And, we're going to see stress in that environment for a while.
Before I turn it over to John Leonard to conclude, Mike Wynn, could you talk about single family for a second from your perspective?
Somebody needs to mute their phone. It's getting feedback.
Yeah, can you hear me at all?
Yeah.
Based on what I'm hearing from the local BIA, surprisingly, the month of April wasn't as bad as you might expect for new home building. The public builders adapted very fast to virtual home tours, really doing as much as they possibly can with customers by computer. The first 2 months of May have fallen off a bit, but again, not as much as you might think, considering what we're all up against.
Randy?
Yeah.
Just a comment on the residential. What our residential owners, our multifamily owners, are concerned about is that the legislature is going to take the opportunity to impose more rent control and restrictions. For instance, there's a bill in the assembly right now by an assemblyman out of San Francisco for a 25% statewide rent reduction on all residential properties. I don't think that, realistically, I hope it doesn't have a chance of passing, but all the restrictions you're putting on the residential landlords, and they're afraid that the legislature is going to use this as an opportunity to put more restrictions and controls in place. There's no crisis that should go to waste. So that's the biggest concern of the multifamily people we represent.
Thank you, Chuck. Do we have any other questions from any of the attendees before John concludes? No? Okay, John, do you want to go off mute and just say thank you?
Sure. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending. This has been a wonderful discussion. We had about 75 people participate, which is wonderful. I was going to mention something from the multifamily side. We have a ownership in an apartment project in Midtown, and all of our apartment tenants are currently paying rent. I think we have one tenant who's not paying rent. The commercial tenants, on the other hand, are not as willing to participate right now in their retail obligation, their rent obligations. So hopefully this will turn the corner soon. I think this was a fabulous discussion. I want to thank everybody for participating and joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you again on May 26th when we have Steve Gordon, who's the director of the DMV, join us. And I hope that all of you will be able to attend. If anybody is interested in participating as a sponsor, that's an opportunity as well. And you'll get an email from Suzanne Blackledge at Tammy Botts Events Planners, who capably runs our organization. We thank you, Suzanne. And we look forward to seeing you all very soon. And thank you for your time today. Excellent.
John and Randy, I want to thank you for this meeting. It was very informative, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Val. We appreciate everybody attending as well. These are challenging times, but we are all in it together, and the community of which we are a part is resilient, adaptive, and capable of evolution. So I know that my panelists and I view the future with optimism and a sense of energy, and we hope that you guys do as well.
And in closing, if I could say thank you to Nancy Park and Pete Thompson and Randy Dixon, Steve Fleming, and of course, Randy Getz, our moderator. We appreciate your professionalism and knowledge, and we're looking forward to hearing from you again soon. So thank you very much. I think that
Thank you.
concludes our meeting.
Thanks, guys.
Take care. Be well, be safe.
Bye, Johnny.
Bye, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Hey.